Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first part of the rhetorical critical paradigm. We are going to finish up rhetoric today, and then next week we'll be moving into the criticism part of how we critique and by what lenses we critique rhetoric. So just a quick little review. Obviously, you're watching the videos. I know it's hard when they're all pre-recorded, but I really did that thinking it was in the best interest of so many people in so many different places. So rhetoric we defined very simply as persuasion. That is true. It's question on the final. So there it is. And we talked about how people use language. This paradigm is very language focused. We are analyzing documents, artifacts where language already exists. We can even analyze language in memes, on TV shows, etc., speeches, billboards, everything. So that's the lens that we're looking at now. And what we're saying is we can learn from going back and looking at these memes and speeches and artifacts. And I think I told you someone will do a huge analysis about the rhetoric of the president during this pandemic. Someone will do an analysis of memes and what it says about our society and our values. All of that good stuff. So I took you through some of the classic Aristotelian or neoclassical ideas that the Greeks came up with. And that's, again, where rhetoric starts. You're always going to start with the Greeks if you get into rhetoric. And we even talked about Aristotle, of course. Back here, this was Cicero, and went through some Greek history. We talked a little bit about traditional Aristotelian genres where they had to speak and analyze discourse. And remember, rhetoric is all about analyzing persuasion and discourse. So that's what we're dealing with. One of the ways that we become more persuasive in our discourse is to use very vivid and descriptive language, to use metaphor, which includes some of the two types here that were talked about in your text. And lastly, we ended up with me introducing you to one of our fathers of rhetoric outside of Aristotle. I would say one of the next big names that comes to us in the 50s is Kenneth Burke. So huge name in rhetoric, had a lot to say about rhetoric and how we should analyze and look at rhetoric. So I went through how we identify with people or make a relationship with people through communication that can then lead us to action. Burke, your clicker questions were actually on the clicker questions I already have here. That rhetoric is defined as persuasion, and according to Burke, you need identification and substance to get to action. That would be true. And epidectic rhetoric is legal discourse is false. So you answered them in the test format online already. Yours were a little bit different, don't worry. So we come back to Burke. Burke also said that language is important, and how we use it to describe things is basically provides a drama. So you may have learned about this in 300 because this theory is also discussed in 300. Not sure what all you are covering in there or how far you've gotten. But Burke believed that everything was basically in the form of a drama. And furthermore, if we explained things in the form of this play or this drama, it would have more impact, more meaning, more persuasion to it. And that's going to lead us into the narrative paradigm, which is essentially storytelling. So Burke was big on the whole world is a stage. We are merely the players acting out in it. And everything in our lives revolves around this drama. So he said there are 5 parts to the pentad, and these are listed for you in the newer version edition of the book, this one, on 292. And here's the 5 elements, essentially. You have the act. It identifies the thought or behavior around which the drama occurs. The scene is the setting or the situation where the actual act is occurring. The agent are the persons committing the act. And the agency is the means by which the act is carried out. and the purpose, for what reason. So I use the pentad a lot to criticize advertisements or to analyze advertisements. I think it's a very helpful tool. We can also use it a few other ways. So I know it can be difficult just to understand or read it and it sounds good, but you're like, what is that? So let's say you wanted to get a date because you need one, and isolation's getting pretty lonely. So we are no longer barred from going out. Where would you go to a concert? Who would you go see? Maybe I'll have you answer these today for your discussion question. All right, if you were going to go to a concert in San Diego, what would be the best scene to go to? Where would you want to go see it? The scene is the setting. So is that the House of Blues? Is it Humphreys by the Bay? Is it the sports arena, Qualcomm? Is it the open-aired amphitheater? Which actually, I love the open-aired amphitheater on campus. It's a really great place to see a show. Maybe North Park Observatory. What scene? What is the setting, or where are you going to go? Okay, who are you going to go see? What group do you want to go see? That's going to be the agent, okay? The agent. Who is the person or band or group you are going to go see play? If I had my choice, I know I'm uncool, but my favorite band I would want to see, and they're coming to San Diego, would be the Lumineers. I would go see them. The Lumineers would be the agent. Now, let's talk about the act. What is the act? What are they doing? They're playing music. It's a concert. The act is a concert. It's at, let's say, North Park Observatory, or we could do the open air theater. Let's do the Lumineers at the open air theater on campus playing their music. Now, what is the agency? The agency is typically the hardest part for the audience for students to grasp. The agency, the means by which the act is carried out. How do they play music? How do they put on a show physically? What do they actually need to do that? Okay, they need speakers, they need sound equipment, they need lights, they need instruments. That is the agency, the means by which they make the music. Okay? So I'm hoping that little example gave you an idea of how we use the pentad. Why are they doing it? Well, some people could say they're doing it to make money. Sure. I also think they enjoy entertaining to some degree. And I'm going to show you a couple ads because I have an assignment when I teach 300. Mr. Loki has come to join us. Say hello, Loki. Hi. Loki. Oh, boy. Loki's a pain, so hopefully he's not gonna go away. He does this all day. All right, let's take a look at a couple ads and see if we can analyze them according to the pentad. Visuals. I've got all kinds of ads in here that we might be able to analyze according to the pentad. So let me. I don't. Yikesters, where am I going? What's in? Oh, here we go. Ooh, let's look at this one. So this is a Crest ad, as you can see. And what is the act that's happening here? Well, the act is brushing your teeth or mouthwash. And we have these two people in the mouthwash that are kissing. So those are agents. What is gonna, this is great. The scene is pretty simple. It's got the color of what we now associate with mouthwash or toothpaste, blue. It's clean, it looks fresh. That's the scene, or just the way the ad is laid out. The act, brushing your teeth. And for what purpose? Well, why would you use this? You would use this to get fresh breath so that someone might kiss you. Now, what is the agency? How do you get this fresh, clean breath so that someone will kiss you? Crest. Crest is the agency. Crest is the means by which you get this. All right, let's take a look at another one. Here's another one I think is Well, all right, we'll just go with it because it's here. Gucci guilty. So we have this setting. Let's talk about the setting. It looks to be a romantic, dark room. They don't appear to have clothing on. Sexy, smoldering setting. Okay, who are the agents? Okay, well, the agents here, we have a beautiful woman, we have a good-looking man who are engaging in some type of amorous activity. So let's talk about the act. What is the act here? Well, I'm going to leave that up to you, but it looks like they're getting along pretty well, is what I'm saying. The act is, the two here are in the act of showing some kind of love or sex or something like that. How can you get this setting and this agent and this act? How can you get that? What do you have to do? What is the agency? What is the means by which you get all that? Guess what? It's the perfume. The perfume is the agency. If you wear this perfume, you as a man or woman will also then get another agent, man or woman. That's beautiful. And you will have a lovely, sexy, steamy night in a dark room with them for the purpose of, yeah, getting some. What do you think? I'm hoping I just explained that well. So that's how we use the pentad, and it can actually be quite fun to kind of look at advertisements and how they are appealing to us through different ways. What's interesting, when I did work at Point Loma, one of the ways we sold our school, for sure, hands down, was the setting. We definitely played to the fact that we were an oceanfront campus, and that was a persuasive element to a lot of people. They were the number two surfing campus in California outside of Santa Barbara. So we played up our scene. Now, what if we were trying to play up our agents? Who would we want to advertise or sell at the university? Who are our agents? Well, there's two, I think. There's the faculty, and there's also a diverse student body. Those are the persons. What are they doing? The behavior is learning. And so when you see dramas about SDSU or an SDSU commercial, they're learning and they're in the classroom. How are they learning? How is that act carried out? Through textbooks, through lectures, through professors, etc. So hopefully you could take anything and put it into a drama type and explain these elements. And it's a very persuasive or effective way to sell people on something. So that is dramatism. Also by Burke. All right. Cluster analysis, we're still with Burke here, looks at clusters of language and tries to determine their attitudes and meanings. So Burke believed that speakers used certain language in certain ways that reflected their motives and their attitudes. I think we could do a cluster analysis of Trump's language, and it would reflect a lot about his meanings, attitudes, and motives. I actually had a student who did a cluster analysis project on Breaking Bad, and they did it on the wife. Holy heck, what is the wife's name? I forget the wife's name now, but most of her language, if you've ever seen Breaking Bad, is very negative. It's fearful. She actually, a lot of people didn't like her character, the wife, because she's always fear-mongering and has these negative attitudes. And you get that just by looking and analyzing what she says in the script. So cluster analysis is just another way of using storytelling and language, but we do this by identifying and looking at key terms and patterns of what the person says all the time. And you do, I think, start to pick up on people's meanings, motives, and attitudes. I mentioned in the other video that we had binge watched all of Schitt's Creek, and I seriously found myself starting to speak a little like David and Alexis, which was very, very concerning to me, using a little bit of vocal fry and and I was like, oh, do not do that, because does that language portray a certain attitude about that character? Absolutely, it does. It's not just the language they're using, but I think it's also the nonverbal, the intonations, the vocal fry, it's everything else that is said. And so certainly cluster analysis is another way to look at and analyze language and motives. The final way we do that in rhetoric is through narrative analysis. And this is, whoopsie, Walter Fisher. And he believed that all humans were storytellers, basically. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I have the page wrong here because the book put the chapter in a different place when it came out with the new edition. So let me give you the narrative chapter. Page is 293. 293 is the page. My apologies for that. I'm going to change it right now. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Fisher and the narrative paradigm. So he said everything's about a story, and that's how we should talk. That's what rhetoric is. How do you know if someone's telling a good story? This is really interesting because, we have influencers now online. They've obviously connected and identified with you in some way, and you have been led to action so that you follow them and listen to them. And a lot of what they're doing is telling a story. I personally online get stuck on the Dodo. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's an animal site, and they always suck me into these animal stories about the baby kitten rescued in the trash, and then, you have to pause and watch an ad before you can watch the rest of it because I have to know how the story ends. Everything is story. You could analyze American Idol, which I did, because everything they're doing is a story to hook you in, to persuade you to watch the show so you know how the story turns out. The Olympics is like that too. We're not going to have it this year, but certainly it unfolds as we get to know people's stories, and then we root for them and we want them to win. So what makes a persuasive story? Well, Fisher says you have to have two main components to a good story. You have to have coherence, which is basically logic. It has to follow a sensible pattern. It has to make sense. It has to be coherent. We even talk about characterological coherence, which is that characters would act in that way. This is what we know to be logical and normal. The story makes sense. But that's not enough. The story also has to have fidelity. And fidelity means that it has to ring true to us. We have to relate to it. So it has to make sense. If the story doesn't make sense, we're gone. That's like me in Westworld. Sorry, Westworld fans, I've tried, but I can't follow the story logically. I have no idea what's going on. So I tuned out. It just really wasn't working for me. And it really didn't have much fidelity for me either. It just didn't click with me or relate to me. People would go to this fantasy world and do whatever they want. I don't know. I just wouldn't do that. Maybe morally, ethically, the whole concept just didn't relate to me. So guess what? I don't watch Westworld. It didn't make sense and didn't have any fidelity for me. So one of the things that you have to try to do as a storyteller is, yes, the story has to be followable, it has to be logical in some ways, and it has to ring true to people's experiences. And that's what we call fidelity. We say ring true to people's experiences. We have to be able to relate to it and say, oh my gosh, I've thought that before too. And I think that's what gets us on the media, social media so much when we follow people, is because maybe we relate to a quote they put up or they said something. We're like, oh, that's so me. And I put one up. It was a quote that said something like, I'm the type of person who has to stop a song in the middle and start it over again because I wasn't appreciating it enough. And I was like, that's me. I get that. I will do that. So it has to have coherence. It has to have fidelity. A couple other elements that Fisher lays out, and these are where they are. Oh, actually, does he lay them out? I wanted to say there used to be a little text box with these elements in it. However, they've taken that out of the book. So it looks like they're still in there. You can still read it, just not in a very nice little box form like it used to be. So we might look at again, what is the structure of the story? What are the characters like? Do we get attached to the characters real quickly? And I did when I was watching Schitt's Creek. I didn't like the mayor. He annoyed me, although I did come to care for him. And a lot of people complained about narrative characters, the narrative arc of the characters in Game of Thrones. They said, oh, you rushed season 8. There was no analysis of the characters. We couldn't get to that. They wouldn't have acted that way. And we all hated it, right? Again, the setting of the story. Where is the setting? And is it something you can relate to? Situated storytelling features. When we talk about telling a story, does it have a climax? Does it have cliffhangers? Does it resolve itself? And what is the bottom line takeaway from the story? What is the purpose? And that kind of, again, the purpose is like Burke's in terms of, what is the pentad doing? What is the bottom line? What is the purpose? What is the reason behind it all? So when we analyze a lot of different artifacts, documents, TV shows, memes, speeches, we look and say, are you telling a good story, a persuasive story? And again, if you have ever been persuaded, most persuasion comes out of a story. I notice this even about pastors in churches. Guess what they do? They tell stories. Stories get us. We listen to them. And if they're good stories and they make sense and they relate to us, we are persuaded. And that is the whole point of narrative, looking at the narrative analysis of a story. So that is really the end of rhetoric, believe it or not. Okay, these are the ways we look at language and analyze it. Now, if you remember me telling you, criticism has a bigger purpose, though. Criticism looks at our values and ideology and even power struggles in society. So we can analyze something, a narrative. Say we analyze the narrative from a court case about sex trafficking victims. We can do a narrative analysis and then apply a greater societal meaning or critique to that analysis. And that's where we're headed with the critical paradigm. So once you have an artifact and you've analyzed its rhetoric, then you can make implications about the broader societal social justice impacts of what that rhetoric is saying. And that's going to lead us into critical studies, that broader lens that says, okay, now that we've analyzed this, what is this saying about our society and our values and our ideology? And that's next week already. So hang out. We will get to next week. We are cruising right through it. I hope those two made sense to you. And we shall talk again soon. Where is my recording button? Oh, please don't tell me you didn't record that. Oh, here we go.